What's up everyone, Man here, and we're bringing you some Modern Horizons 2 content. That's right, so this video here is going to be highlighting 3 decks that are going to start popping up after Modern Horizons 2. So this is not going to be talking about existing decks that are going to get a boost in power level from new cards. This is more highlighting cards that are going to spawn new decks. There are variations or slight themes that might already exist in Modern, but these specific types of decks aren't really existing right now. So I'm going to highlight kind of what to keep an eye out for, what cards in Modern Horizons 2 will help you to build this new type of deck, and then kind of where to go from there. We just kind of keeping an eye out in the Modern scene as events start opening up, people are starting to play more stuff online. Where's things going to go for the Modern scene? So this episode is all about 3 new decks. We will be highlighting cards to keep an eye out for existing decks in a later video. But let's jump into our first deck to talk about. So first deck is going to be highlighting, it's all about Suspend. So you can see we'll be posting up cards right up here to kind of go over what this whole Suspend deck is going to be about. I am predicting kind of the best version of it is going to be Sultai, so that way you can kind of take advantage of the plethora of powerful cards that exist for that Suspend mechanic. So there's a bunch of spoilers that came out specifically for our tutor effect that you can see, our profane tutor, which again is popping up here for you to be able to look at. So that's why I think it's going to be a Sultai version, specifically because of this, right? All right, so Profane Tutor, which is kind of one of the most powerful effects that exists in the whole history of Magic, which is that tutor effect, being able to search your library for a specific card and add that card to your hand. The way that they're balancing this out is you suspend it for 2 turns. Costs 2 mana to be able to suspend it, as that suspend cost, which is that 1 colorless and a black, and then after those 2 turns you get to be able to cast it, search your library for any card, and then be able to add that card to your hand. So really powerful effect, but not being able to sit there and wait 2 turns, being able to cast it right out and just find a specific card seems really awesome. We'll talk about the payout cards and how you can be able to do that soon. So the other super powerful cards that were announced and released that are the Suspend cards. Next one would be our green card, which is our Gaia's Will, which is essentially the green version with Suspend of Yawgmoth's Will, which if you guys have played the Vintage Cube or seen some super old school decks, this card is top tier. Being able to just cast your stuff from your graveyard for free, and if your deck is full of Suspend cards, where you can just say, hey, this has no converted mana cost, I'm just going to cast this for free, this seems pretty great. So again, you have to exile cards off of it, but till the end of your turn, you can play lands and you can cast spells from your graveyard. So seems great. If you fetched a bunch of stuff, you can play your fetch lands. If you've been able to sit there and, you know, play 1 land a turn still, that does matter, but you know, it is something that you can think about. You have a bunch of Suspend cards, start casting those off, you know, really powerful effects. So we've got Gaia's Will's in there. Now we've got kind of our next super powerful new version of a Suspend card, which is our, just actually spoiled today, I believe, was Inevitable's Betrayal. So Inevitable Betrayal is kind of a Suspend version of Bribery. So if you guys aren't familiar with Bribery, basically it has the exact same effect, just minus the Suspend. So normally, if you're going to cast it, like hard cast it, you're going to be suspending this for 3 turns. Costs 1 and double blue to be able to suspend it. After the Suspend has gone off, or if you're cheating this into play some other way, you can search your opponent's library for a creature card and put that card onto the battlefield under your control. So this effect, that Bribery effect that we were talking about to steal your opponent's creatures, is a great way to find a win con, because a lot of the Suspend type cards are value cards. I'm going to tutor for something, I'm going to draw cards, right? Ancestral Visions lets us draw cards, where something like this actually gets us a win con. Now there is, of course, our way to be able to make a bunch of tokens, right? Well, 2 tokens, you get some rhinos, and so you can be able to generate some threats that way. But now we have ways to help us cast these cards, right? With Modern Horizons 2, we now get access to shardless agents. And that's why I'm thinking it's going to be of that Sultai colors, that blue, black, and green cards. So shardless agent, for those that aren't familiar or never saw it play in Legacy, it's a 2/2 for 3, right? One colorless, a blue and a green, and you can be able to cast this and cascade. So once you've cast this spell, even if they're countering the shardless agent, you still get to activate your cascade effect. It's a triggered ability from the cast, which you'll reveal cards from the top of your library, and you may be able to cast a card with less converted mana cost than shardless agent. So in this instance, we need to find something that's less than 3. So 2, 1, or in a lot of our case, 0 is what we're looking for with our suspend cards. Gaia's Will, Profane Tutor, right? Even our new Inevitable Betrayal, Ancestral Visions, these sort of payout cards is where we're kind of hoping. So if you're going to be building this type of list, you don't want to fill it up with a bunch of 1 and 2 drops. You could, if you're like, hey, I'm getting a bunch of value, this 2-drop is really going to matter. Otherwise, you're hoping to hit one of these 0 costs and just cast it outright. So, of course, there'll be 4 of in your list. The other way to get around this is an older card. I say older, right? From Amonkhet, which is our As Foretold. And if you guys have been kind of watching, there's a reason why it spiked up to about $40 after they started releasing spoilers about these cards. So our As Foretold lets us get around our suspend cost, because once per turn we can be able to cast a card from our hand with converted mana costs equal or less than the number of counters that are on As Foretold. So if I play As Foretold on turn 3, I can immediately cast one of my suspend cards from my hand. So if I happen to have Profane Tutor that I've been holding on to, boom, let's cast that. Let's go find any card in my deck. Boom, let's cast our Inevitable Betrayal, so I can be able to get a threat from your deck and put it on the battlefield. Let me cast Ancestral Visions and just reload my hand, right? Let me cast, probably don't want to cast Gaia's Will right away because you've probably tapped out and don't have as much mana to spend, but you know, you could, right? You could do things like that, but depends on how much you've thrown into your graveyard up to this point. But the point of it is Shardless Agent and As Foretold are your 2 ways to kind of cheat out your cascade spells, and a lot of what decks are going to be trying to run with this. So that's why I'm saying this is the #1 new type of deck that I was going to highlight first. There's going to be other decks, 2 other decks that we're going to highlight that don't really exist in Modern up to this point. Now, as it gets a little bit closer, more spoilers are going to come out. People are going to start brewing and finding out best ways to kind of go about this. I don't want to put a list in paper form yet to, you know, show you guys yet, because I need to start doing some testing. Haven't finished doing any testing with it yet, but I do feel like this is going to be a very powerful deck and something that you guys need to keep an eye on going forward. Probably the #1 deck to keep an eye on going forward. That's why we're highlighting it first. Moving on, deck number 2, and that is our Enchantress deck. So up until now, if you wanted to play a green or white based enchantment style deck, there's kind of 2 options that exist in Modern. There's the green-white Boggles version, where you're just putting a bunch of ores on top of a slippery Boggle, right? And being able to swing in for a lot of damage off of this one creature. Definitely a fun way to play if you like that, but does kind of get hosed on sacrifice type effects and things like that. So if we're seeing a lot of Liliana of the Veil and things like that, your deck's gonna have a hard time. The other way to play it, which I feel like Enchantress is gonna take kind of a note from, is our red-white prison decks, which is, hey, here's Blood Moons, right? Here's our Ghostly Prisons. We're just gonna kind of lock you out, make sure your stuff is going to be taxed a little bit, and just kind of value out with Planeswalkers. This is going to be kind of a slight variation of it. We're going to take some of those taxing effects as we go into it, but it's really going to be relying on these new printing of cards. Enchantress Presence, right, which is, hey, the name comes from Enchantress. There's a reason why. It's an enchantment by itself, costs 3, right? 2 colorless and a green. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. That simple. All right, I'm gonna just cast stuff. It's very similar to some of our creatures that we have seen, right? If you were playing Historic, you might be familiar with them. If you've been playing Modern and green-white Boggles, right, you can be able to see, right, our cores coming out there. You're putting ores specifically on that, drawing cards. So this draw effect from enchantments is nothing new, but this Enchantress style of deck is not really something we've seen because there hasn't been as many payout. Like if you wanted this effect, you would have to pay 4 mana up to this point, right? Now you only have to be paying 3 mana for an enchantment that stays, that doesn't have a body, right? Where you'd have to pay 4 mana to get this effect on a body. There's also Sithis, Hand of the Harvest, which is our next type of Enchantress effect, which is one of our legendary creatures in the set. So for all of you Commander players out there that are interested, you could be able to run this now. So whenever you cast an enchantment spell, gain a life and draw a card. Life gain can be actually relevant, so did want to highlight that. The next sort of creature that we're going to be focusing on is our Sanctum Weaver for this type of deck. All right, it's an 0/2, but you get to tap it and add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. So there shouldn't be any problem with you getting a lot of enchantments out and at least generating 3-4 mana, maybe even more, off of this Sanctum Weaver. Protection effects are important to think about, so things like our Sterling Grove, all right, that's kind of one of these powerful ones that helps protect all of our enchantments, which is a green and a white. Other enchantments you control have Shroud, so that means you can't target them with anything, your opponents can't target them with anything. And then you can pay 1, sack it, and search your library for an enchantment card, reveal it, put it on the top of your library. So a little semi-tutor type effect. The next one is our Solitary Confinement, which legacy version of the Enchantress deck did run this card as well, so it's cool to see it being reprinted and allowed to be in Modern now. So it costs 2 colorless and a white. So it's got a lot of effects, lots to read, but really it's just sort of a blanket protection effect, very similar to our Sterling Grove, which gives our stuff Shroud, makes sure you can't have those be targeted. It's got lots of effects. There's a cumulative upkeep, which is basically meaning that every upkeep you have to make sure you're doing this or you lose this card, which in this case, you have to make sure that you have a card to discard to it, or you have to sacrifice this enchantment. You skip your draw step every turn, so you have to rely on things like Sithis to draw cards or Enchantress Presence to draw cards. Otherwise, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. You have Shroud now. So where Sterling Grove is really good because you are sitting here and making all of your enchantments have Shroud, now you have Shroud. So those burn decks that are trying to just burn you down, you don't have to worry about those lightning bolts hitting you anymore. Also, you prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. That's combat damage, that's non-combat damage. You don't have to worry about it. You're safe. You're blanketed out. But if you don't have a way to fuel this card off like Presence or Hand of the Harvest, you're going to have a hard time. You shouldn't be too worried about it though. So that's going to be kind of the main stuff that's sitting around there. There's also the best way that I think to be going about this is to enable token generation off of this sort of Pillow Forty type strategy of I'm just going to sit behind this wall that I'm creating and you're not going to mess with me. You'll have no way to do it. So I'm going to be able to play things like Luminarch Ascension, right? At the beginning of each opponent's end step. If you didn't lose life, so well, hey, I have Solitary Confinement. They can't deal damage to me. So I'm guaranteeing going to make sure I'm putting a counter on this, all right? If you happen to be able to have 4 or more counters on Luminarch Ascension, then you can be able to pay 2, 1 colorless and a white, and you get to create a 4/4 white angel. So boom, here's a threat now. So Pillow Fort, protected, all these walls around me, you can't mess with me, and now I'm just making angels every turn. Pew, pew, pew. In addition to that, you could be able to run stuff like Sigil of the Empty Throne, right? Which is a little bit more expensive, costs 3 colorless, double white. But if you have Sanctum Weaver and you're making a bunch of enchantments on the battlefield, you're going to be having plenty of mana to be able to cast this. So whenever you cast an enchantment, and your deck is just full of them, whenever you cast an enchantment, you create a 4/4 white angel token with flying. So I feel like this is going to be the best and easiest way to sort of build this type of deck, right? You're going to be sitting here behind your wall of enchantments. You're sitting here with your ghostly prison, so they have to pay extra mana to be able to attack you. You're going to be sitting here and making activated abilities cost more. Now, it will affect something like Luminarch Ascension if you're running this, but it shuts down things like man lands. It shuts down things like the planeswalkers that can be annoying. So having this in there, definitely worth it. But so that's kind of the overarching idea. Again, I'm not putting up a specific list yet because we're still testing things out, still twisting and changing, you know, still a couple spoilers getting released. But there will be lists coming up, and we'll do deck techs of these kind of lists coming up in the future, so stay tuned for those. Third deck that we're going to be talking about is Reanimator. Now, you might be saying, hey, Nan, Grizzlebrain existed, there's been Reanimator types of decks. Yes, 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 I know, we've tried Reanimator before, but that was back when we had Simian Spirit Guide. That was also back when we had Faithless Looting. Those are gone now. Without those, it makes it much, much harder for us to be able to go the Reanimator route. But now we have tools that start to mirror what the Legacy version. Modern is really shaping up to become a Legacy light now, and it's showing in this set. Modern Horizons 2 is having cards like Unmarked Grave. All right, Unmarked Grave fills in our role of Entomb. Costs 1 extra mana, 1 colorless and a black. Search your library for a non-legendary creature and throw that into your graveyard. But the non-legendary actually works out really well for our Persist, which is our modern legal version of Animate Dead. So Persist, 1 colorless and a black. We get to return target non-legendary creature from our graveyard to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. It's just like Animate Dead, but our focus now is shifting from those legendary powerhouses like the Grizzlebrand type of deck to be able to start focusing on our non-legendaries. So the two most powerful non-legendaries that I feel like need to be reanimated in this type of deck are going to be our Archon of Cruelty, which is our newest version that's coming out. It's nothing but card advantage on it. It's expensive, right? You say 8 mana to cast this 6/6 flying guy? What? Why am I going to do that? No, you're paying 2 mana to cast this because it's coming back from your graveyard, and it's a 5/5 flyer. There's not much in Modern that's going to be dealing with that in a straight up fight. When it enters the battlefield, you're going to be getting all the card advantage, right? You're sitting here, you're making your opponent sack a creature or planeswalker. Pretty important. They have to discard a card, they lose 3 life. You get to draw a card, and you get to gain 3 life. So it's like a stabilization swing. Make your opponent lose card advantage, you gain card advantage. It's just a huge swing in your favor for this, even if it is a 5/5. All right, so that's one way to be able to go about it. So I'm expecting to see, hey, I'm running 4 Persist, I'm running 4 Archons, I'm running 4 Unmarked Grave. The other creature to be reanimating in this deck, Sundering Titan. This card's like 30 cents right now. It used to be seeing play in things like Mono Blue Tron. Then it just sort of fell off. But as people are going to start playing these multicolored decks again, like the first deck we talked about was this Sultai value deck where you're focused on Suspend. If you're running 3 colors, and I'm running essentially just a black deck, right? You can do mono black. I'm probably going to see multicolors in this. Even so, being able to run Sundering Titan in your list to just start blowing up your opponent's lands seems like a great way to go. It's kind of mean, but hey, bringing back, right, a 6/7, okay. And when it leaves the battlefield, I'm going to blow up even more lands. I really only need 2 lands to be able to get my deck to go off. So if you aren't sitting there with, you know, a deck that might need 3, 4, 5 lands, you're going to have a hard time, especially if you're a 3-color list that's saying, well, I'm very tight on my mana base and I don't have that fluctuation to deal with you destroying my lands. So I think there's going to be multiple versions of this, people trying things out. Mono black, I think, is a great way to go if you're going to be running something like this. You could even go like a black-white style of play because there's some cool white creatures. Might even be worth it to start running some legendary creatures in there as well to get in there. Some people might even try just a red-black version, right? There's ways to go. How am I going to throw my creatures into my graveyard? How am I going to be able to get them back, right? So there's going to be some tweakings and changing. This is going to be kind of the most up in the air as people start speculating and trying to play with it because of the amount of graveyard hate that exists in Modern and how people are going to adjust their sideboards to deal with a kind of a newer, powerful reanimation deck. Right? There's already graveyard decks that exist. People are playing, you know, Dredge for one. So it's like, oh, okay, if a lot of Dredge comes up, we're going to be filling our boards with a lot of graveyard hate. We'll see post Modern Horizons 2 what sort of decks are going to be taking over, but these are 3 decks that don't really exist in their current form that are going to start existing after Modern Horizons 2 comes
here.
out. So keep an eye out for these decks in particular.
Content maker
and commentator.
Thanks for tuning in and watching, guys. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and check the description for more information about other content that I'm doing. I've also got a new podcast, Nan Man's Nerd Corner, which you guys can find out on Spotify or iTunes. It's got a bunch of Magic content as well as other stuff. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and I'll see you guys next game.
Over the next couple of weeks, so keep your guys' eyes peeled on the channel. If you guys like the content, make sure you're hitting that subscribe, follows, all that kind of good stuff. There's also links down below in case you missed anything. But thanks for tuning in and watching, guys, and I'll see you all next game.